I was trying to decide if I wanted to share my birth story on here, but I decided, you know what, I'll do a brief summary of it. I don't want to go into too much depth and detail. There's a lot of you that have been often checking in on me, telling me you're praying for me, thinking about me. I was kind of struggling with anxiety coming up to the birth, so I thought, you know what, I think I'm just going to share a quick story about the birth. I'd also like to share some of my postpartum experience and maybe compare a little bit of my experience between having my firstborn child and my second. This is little baby Lexi. She is really chubbing out. She's 7 weeks old. And we are really, really enjoying her. Hey, Lexi girl.
You are the sunshine on rainy days. And if I have sunshine, a rainbow is coming my way. If I have sunshine, a rainbow is coming my way.
You are so cute. You are so cute. I quickly popped Lexi in her crib. We'll see if she's happy. I thought I'd start off with my first labor story. When Xander was born, the details are kind of foggy to me as far as times. I didn't really have everything down pat, but I know that I started labor on a Saturday, and I never know when they technically consider labor starting, but it was like a Saturday afternoon, sometime late evening in the night. I went to the midwife's house and was there all night in labor, and the next day I still had not progressed past like 3 centimeters. And I was so discouraged because it had been a lot of back labor, throwing up, that type of thing. And I just gave up and I'm like, let's go to the hospital. I need some help. So we ended up going to the hospital. They put me on Pitocin. They gave me some morphine. And I was there all day at the hospital. Things had kind of slowed down some, but then they ramped up again. And then they just had to keep cranking up the Pitocin till it was like at the top level. I remember they said it was just, yeah, I was at like a 20 or a 19 or however far up the numbers go. And there's all kinds of things that went along with that, kind of like panic attacks. They told me that came from the pit, I believe. I also ended up getting an epidural. I had not wanted that at all, but I ended up getting that. And then all the following night, I was still in labor. They just kept cranking up the Pitocin, like I said. And then Xander was born at like 10 something on a Monday morning. So it started like on a Saturday afternoon, ended on a Monday morning. And just everything that went along with that, I was dreading my second birth, and everyone kept telling me, you know what, your second one is so much easier, it's so much better, you're gonna be fine. And so the second one rolled around and I sort of had this thing in my mind, maybe, just maybe this time it'll just go super fast. And I had so much false labor for weeks beforehand. It was becoming really annoying, especially towards the end. I'm like, is this actual labor? Is it false labor? Because some of them were actually pretty painful. It was a Sunday afternoon and I was pretty sure that it was the real deal, because it had been just continuously coming regularly. I had also had fairly regular contractions or startup contractions before with my false labor, and I would time them and they'd be pretty regular, and then an hour or two later they'd die off. But these just kept going and going, and I'm like, you know what, I am positive I am in the beginning stages of labor. The contractions were definitely intense enough that you notice them, but I could still sleep through them. So that night I went to bed and I slept until 5:30 in the morning, and that's when I sat up and I'm like, okay, these are legit, I can't sleep through them anymore. So this was 5:30 Monday morning. We started getting ready to go, all the things. We got into the hospital around noon. I was trying to decide when do I go in, when not. But I'm sort of the type of person that I just feel better when I'm where I'm supposed to be when the babies arrive, sort of like I'm in professional care, because I just get a little bit anxious and uptight. So I got in there and I was only at a 2 and I was pretty discouraged. They're like, you know what, well, you can go home or you can stay here for another hour or two. We don't really admit people unless they're in active labor. Let's just see if you're in active labor, if you're progressing or not. And so we stayed there for about 2 hours, and that was then at 4 centimeters. And to me, I'm like, yay, this is gonna be amazing. 2 hours, I made progress for 2 centimeters. And it really made me hopeful because my previous birth, it had been like all night and I was just stuck at a 3. So they said, you know what, you are, progressing. We would probably recommend you just stay here. And so we did. So I went into this kind of with an open mind. I really wanted to do it naturally. I don't really like pumping myself full of drugs. And I was in the back of my mind, I've kind of had this thing like, what if this epidural and these pain meds and all these chemicals or whatever you call them that's being pumped into my body, what if that was one of the culprits that kind of triggered my ulcerative colitis? Because After my son was born, it was only like 3 or 4 months, I started having symptoms, and that's when I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis that fall. And so I really wanted to do it naturally this time and just avoid any possible things that could make me flare. But I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go in. My doctor said she knows of no instances where an epidural would trigger an ulcerative colitis flare. But she's told me, I'm going to warn you, most women get a flare after they had the baby around 2 to 3 weeks because your hormones are just going through lots of things, and a lot of women flare, which was not very encouraging. Back to the story. But I went in with an open mind. I'm like, I'm just going to do my best. I'm going to pray. I'm going to hope I can get through this. And if I just can't, I'm just going to give in. No shame, no nothing. We'll just kind of roll with it. So things kept progressing. It was kind of slow. By evening time rolled around, I was getting a little bit discouraged and worn out. It had been a long time. Things are definitely getting more intense. And the one memory that sticks out to me is the midwives there were amazing. I just love the practice. But I hadn't actually met any of those before, like they had rotating midwives, and I had kind of signed up with the practice a little bit later on in my pregnancy. Anyway, super nice ladies, very calm and relaxing, and I was getting to the point that I was like getting frantic. I'm like, please tell me I'm progressing. Like it had been so long, I was starting to wear out, and each time they came in, they just had this really calm, like, you're doing good, you know? Like, I remember the one time she made this comment, and I don't think she really meant it. She's like, you're definitely in labor. And I remember thinking, are you serious right now? Like, you're telling me I'm definitely in labor as if I don't know that? I forget where I was, but I remember thinking, yeah, these are definitely legit. They hurt. Like, and you're telling me, and then I felt like she was just downplaying everything. And I'm like, aren't you recognizing the pain I'm in? And when she said that, it just suddenly to me felt like I had an eternity to go yet, because she was sort of saying, yeah, you're definitely in labor. You're coming along. You're doing a good job. And to me, I wanted to hear, you know, I'm getting closer to the end. Hopefully it won't be too much longer, but I can see she probably wasn't trying to give me false hope. And so when that happened, and I had kind of wanted them to check to see how far I was, and they were like, no, we'll just kind of let it go. You know, we want to just naturally let things happen more. And we don't like to, you know, impose on the process or whatever she said. And then later I heard her telling Nolan that, you know, they don't want me to be discouraged if I'm not further than I think I am. Anyway, they had come back later and they could see that I was just kind of getting out of it. And Nolan basically told him, I think she's getting discouraged and would like to know where she's at. And so I kind of had a little bit of a meltdown at that point. But I believe when they checked me that time, they're like, sure, we can check. Maybe it'll help, you know. And I was at a 6. And I just remember thinking, yay, this is going much better than when I was with Xander. Because with Xander, they had me on PIT and I was just being pumped full of it at high levels. And I still was hardly getting anywhere, and it was giving me all these side effects. So it encouraged me. To me, I was progressing faster than before, even though it was a long labor. Anyway, but things were definitely getting pretty intense. And then I realized what a blessing an epidural had been, because with the previous labor, I had never gotten to that really intense labor. Anyway, the other thing is I tend to get back labor. I was really hoping I wouldn't this time, so I had back labor, and then the weirdest thing happened. I had like pain shooting down my legs. So like the front of my thighs almost all the way down to my knees. That was almost actually the worst. Like I felt like the contraction, like the actual contraction was more bearable than like the back pain and the pain in my legs. Like it almost felt like a wave coming on, and it hurt that bad. Like I could hardly keep my legs still. And that was almost the worst part, because my legs hurt so bad. And Nolan, he was a champ through it all. I mean, he was trying to, you know, rub my legs and put pressure on my back and do everything. He was just amazing. And the nurses were definitely praising him later. They're like, you got a trophy, because he stuck with me through the whole time. I don't remember all my times, but I know it was getting later towards night, probably 9, 10 o'clock Monday night, and I was only at a 7. I just kept working through it. I'm like, I can do this, I can do this. And it was probably an hour or 2 later, I don't know how much longer, and when they checked again, I was still at a 7, and then I just completely lost it. I'm like, I can't do this. If I'm still only at a 7, and it hurts this bad, with everything is just, anyway, I'm like, I want an epidural. Finally got it in. I was just terrified, this thing going in, the contractions were so intense. It was definitely very different than Xander. Suddenly Xander's kind of looked like a piece of cake for when they had put it in. From what I had remembered, I'm like, man, this is way worse in some ways. It seemed like the epidural then slowed things down, but it never completely took the pain away, especially on my one side. So I was able to, it seemed to slow it down, and I was able to relax a bit, and I started snoozing just a bit in between because I was so exhausted. The waves of pain just kept coming, and my legs and everything, and I'm like, this epidural is not working, it's not working. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. I really didn't want one of these. I didn't want all this stuff through my body, and now it's not working. Anyway, and so he came back in later, I don't know how much later, an hour or so, tried to rearrange things to see if it could get working better. So the epidural wasn't helping, although I'm sure it took some of the edge off, because afterwards I still couldn't walk right on my legs, but I could still feel all the pain in my legs, the contractions, everything. And I was trying to like calm myself through it and breathe through it. They told me I did well, but I felt like I was going almost crazy. The crazy thing is my water hadn't broke yet until I was like, I think it was like at an 8 or a 9, and they finally just broke it. And then they told me that the baby had, was it meconium or whatever, when they had pooed a little bit beforehand, and I just suddenly panicked because I'm like, oh no. I have a friend that had happened to her child, and the baby had breathed this into their lungs, and she had a lot of issues. They had to work through that first year because she had breathed in, I can't even think now, meconium? What do you call it? That was in my mind. I was like trying to get reassurance. They were reassuring me. They're like, we don't think it's too bad, you know, we'll keep monitoring, it'll be okay. I'm like, so this was in the back of my mind that the baby had already passed his first bowel movement, and I'm like, oh no. This practice where I was actually very natural minded. I really didn't want a C-section, so I made sure I went to somewhere where they're very in favor of natural birth with very little interference or help or whatever, because I wanted to do it as naturally as possible. And these midwives are very much that way, and I very much trusted them because they had been earlier on. They came in and they said such and such a doctor is now on shift, which was a doctor that wasn't with their practice, and she's recommending that you get put on PIT and have your water broke and all this different stuff. And I could tell in the midwives' faces that they weren't really in favor of that. And so I just trusted them because I could tell they felt like it was better to do it just more naturally and progress more naturally. So I'm like, I think, you know, I'll just keep doing what we are. And they're like, I think that's a good choice. So I really trusted them to make the right decisions. And so right when I was getting to the end, I think I was just starting to almost lose it mentally and physically. I mean, it was just so much pain, which obviously anyone that has birthed a child knows what I'm talking about. And it just felt like it was time, and I just kept telling my husband, you have to go get them. You have to go get them. I think it's time. And he would run out and get them, and they'd come back and they're like, you're not quite there yet. And then they would walk out the room again, and I'd just be like, you've got to be kidding. You got to be kidding. I cannot do this any much more longer. And then the next contraction would come, and I'd be yelling at my husband, go get them, go get them. Anyway, finally, I don't know if it was like the third time they came back in because they kept leaving. I'm like, why are they leaving me? I need them now. But see, there was another woman that was like having a baby exactly the same time I was, so I think they were kind of pulled a little bit thin. Anyway, they finally came back in, and I heard them talking between themselves in a quiet voice, but I heard them. And the one midwife was saying to the other, I think that if she doesn't progress much sooner, we should maybe do a cesarean. I'm pretty sure that's what I heard, and I just panicked. I'm like, I did not just come through 20 some hours of labor and an epidural to have to go get more whatever and go have a C-section. I was just panicking. I'm like, I do not want a C-section. It's the last thing I want. And I knew that if they were suggesting a C-section, it was probably pretty serious because they're very much not in favor of C-section if at all possible. So I was panicking, and I just was not getting to the 10, I guess. And then finally, it was that last time when I just told my husband, I'm like, you have to get them in here. I'm positive. And they come in, they were all calm, you know. Suddenly they're like, yep, it's time, let's get this baby out. Let's just do it. So we started, and suddenly they were like, the baby's heart rate is dropping. Janine, you have to get this baby out now. And I was just panicking because I was just thinking, oh great, they want to do a C-section. The baby already had its first bowel movement, and now the heart rate's dropping. And they were just all like, all hands on deck, and yelling at me, or kind of like, come on, come on, come on. Anyway, it was all said and done. 10 minutes later, she was born. So thankfully, it was very quick. I was so exhausted that I couldn't even hardly lift my head to like look at her. I didn't really get a good look at Lexi until, I don't know, probably 30 minutes or so later, just because I was that exhausted. Anyway, but it was super special. It was definitely very different than my first. I just remember with the first, the epidural worked perfectly. I felt no pain. And I just remember when Xander was born and they laid him on my chest. You know, I just remember that first look I got of him. We looked like he was looking at me, and I distinctly remember that. But with Lexi, I was just in so much pain and just so tired. that I couldn't even lift my head to see her. So that was kind of a letdown. I was just holding her and just trying to get my strength back. So that was kind of the difference between the two. You know, through it all, I had peace. I felt like, you know, a lot of people saying they were praying for me, and I just felt that. And it was a good experience, although in some ways it was a lot harder than the first one. And in other ways it was easier. I'm not really sure how to explain it. It definitely went faster than the first one, but it was a lot more intense this round. And after that, I was like, man, I have so much respect for women all over the world that have children. Like, seriously, it is just a feat. Incredible. I was just admiring women all over the world because I had legitly, for the first time, gotten a taste of what it's really like. And, but yeah, it's amazing how quickly you forget. It's just like the Bible says in John 16:22, it says, a woman, when she is in travail, hath sorrow, because her hour is come. But as soon as she is delivered of the child, she remembereth no more the anguish for the joy that a man is born into the world. And it's just amazing how that is so true. Like, when you're in it, it is just tunnel vision and pain, and you just feel like you can't do it. And then as soon as the baby's born, it's gone. And you're just like, you have the pain, but you can face it, and you're just like, forget it. And it's amazing. This is only 7 weeks later, and I'm still already half forgetting the intensity of it, which is a good thing, or we probably would not have more children, right? Anyway, so hopefully that wasn't too much detail. There's various other things, but I don't know how much I really prefer sharing. I already feel like I might have overshared just a bit. I did tear with her, but I'm telling you, the healing, it was not nearly as bad as Xander, I don't believe. I felt like the healing part of the whole postpartum process was so much easier this round. Like, I did not have nearly the pain that I remember with Xander, and it just felt like within a week or so, I was almost back to normal as far as just feeling good, not mentally, and I was still always tired and stuff, but just as far as that pain that you have, I just felt like I healed up so much faster, and that was just incredible. And it just, the whole postpartum thing was a lot easier this time, like the first few weeks. So that was definitely a plus, a big plus. So moving on, talking a little bit more about postpartum. One thing that's maybe a little different, and I'm curious if any of you are like this, let me know in the comments. I actually, the whole thing with postpartum depression and the baby blues and all that, I don't really struggle with that much. It's actually before the baby's born. Like, I really struggle in pregnancy. There's something about when I'm pregnant, my hormones get all crazy. I tend to be more irritable. Just things bother me. I hate to say it because it seems so insensitive to people that can't have children or really desire to be pregnant, or really enjoy pregnancy or whatever. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm not trying to be ungrateful, because I'm super grateful for a healthy pregnancy, but I don't enjoy the pregnancy process. I don't feel like myself. I morph into something. I'm like clumsy, and you know, suddenly, especially at the end, you can hardly do anything. You're out of breath, you're hot, you don't feel good, at least for me. And then it's more actually a mental thing. Like, I really struggle with kind of a depression and just a haze. And it's really, really weird, but as soon as the baby's born, it leaves. Like, it's just gone. That's how it was with Xander, like immediately. And that's how it was with Lexi as well. And it was just sort of like this powerful feeling, like, I'm done. The pregnancy's behind me. I can face the world now. Like, the labor's behind me, the birth's behind me. I did it, and you kind of get this rush of like this powerful feeling. And it lasts, like, for me anyway. And to me, like, the, you know, getting up with the baby and dealing with the baby and the postpartum thing is way more doable than just like everything you're dealing with in your body when you're pregnant there, especially in the 3rd trimester. Thankfully, I don't really struggle with postpartum depression so far. Obviously, I do have kind of your typical, I mean, it's hard. It is hard getting up during the night, and although I've had it really easy this round, but just healing, and your nerves are kind of on edge, at least for me, like loud noises, and just your body's healing, and you just kind of want to rest and be at peace, so to say. And so I do struggle with kind of my nerves, and like if there's too much noise and too much action, or if I'm going too much, it just wears me down and I can't quite handle it. But it's not like that depression. It's not like this no motivation for life and just sort of this I can't deal with life type of thing. Honestly, I'm actually super grateful for that. I think I'd rather deal with it when I'm pregnant than when I have the baby, because if you have a little newborn baby and you're also dealing with the baby blues, that would be really hard, and my heart goes out to women that struggle with that. So yeah, like I said before, healing was incredible. Like, it hardly even hurt afterwards, and I had even tore. But I felt like I didn't need any painkiller. Everything was just so much easier this round, which is just amazing. The other thing that's been incredible is Lexi sleeps way better than Xander ever did. So when Xander was born, he was a hungry little boy, and he would eat at 2 hours on the nose around the clock, and then there was like a stretch at night where he might sleep 4 hours one time, and then it was like 2 hours, 2 hours. I would get that worn out getting up to feed that little guy. But one of the nice things with your first child, you don't really have any other obligations, especially if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're not really in a business or have a job or anything. You can just kind of sleep when they sleep, and though it's really wearing, it's just you and them. Lexi, on the other hand, she has not had near the appetite Xander has. She would go like 3 hours between feedings, and at night she just slept. Like right out of the get-go, it was just like she was up maybe once a night. Twice a night at first, and then it slowly slipped to once a night, and we're still at the one night thing for the most part. Now and then it's maybe twice a night. You all, different ones of you have been telling me in the description that your boys and girls were completely different in the same way. So Xander was always hungry, and she would just kind of snack around, eat maybe every 3 hours. And I'm like, what is this? I'm not even tied to my baby. It hardly even felt like an adjustment because, with Xander, you would just feel like you just got done feeding, and then he'd be hungry again, and you hardly had any time in between. Whereas Lexi, you fed her, and she would just sleep and sleep and sleep, and then you fed her again, and you just felt like you had all this free time. I'm like, do I even have a newborn? So that has been amazing. And then at night, right out of the gate, first they told me, you know what, you need to wake your baby up every 3 hours to make sure she is eating. And I'm like, really? Do we have to start such a bad habit? I did it at first, and then I talked to my sister. My sister's like, I wouldn't worry about it. She said, my baby, your baby was 8 pounds. She's a healthy weight. She'll wake up when she's hungry. As long as she's gaining, I wouldn't bother waking her up. So I didn't. And it has been going amazing. She's steadily gaining. Now we're kind of falling into a system. We put her down around 8 o'clock, 8, 9 o'clock. And then she'll often wake up anywhere between 3 and 5. Sometimes it's around 2 if she's really hungry. She just went through her 6-week thing, which I think she was eating more. So she might wake up at like 2 and then at 5 or something. But for the most part, it's like around 3, 4 o'clock. If you're really lucky, it's like 5 in the morning. And so I get nice long sleeps, which has been incredible for the whole adjustment thing and healing and getting my rest. So I was dreading this as far as like the whole change that was coming. I'm like, it's been so long since I've had a little baby. How are we going to deal with this? Like, I'm the type of person I don't like change. I want the baby, I want more children, but I hate the process kind of thing. Sorry, that sounds weird. Like, I love the newborn, I love the baby, I love having them here, but just like that change and all the things that happen in your life to disrupt your schedule. I just dread going through that until you get into a new normal. And so, honestly, when she came home, I almost felt like, yes, there was lots of changes, but it wasn't nearly the splash I was expecting. And so that has just been so amazing. And we've just been loving it so much. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Speaking of postpartum, we've just been loving her. Xander just loves her to pieces. It took him a little bit to adjust. He had some things to work through. But for the most part, it was pretty easy, I'd say, even for him.
She's starting to smile.
The babies always drink milk when they're little.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they grow up, they eat all kinds of foods.
That's right.
My health has been really good. I've had different scares. Right now I'm going through kind of like, I think my stomach's a little on edge. I have ulcerative colitis, in case some of you don't know. It's an autoimmune condition of your large intestine where you get like ulcers, and yeah, it's not a fun disease to have. So I try really hard with my diet and everything to watch it. So when you're pregnant, your body actually kind of goes into, it suppresses your immune system, which is actually really good for those people that have autoimmune conditions, because it's like a natural immune suppressant. And so I did feel really good during pregnancy as far as my ulcerative colitis. But then I heard about between 3 to 6 weeks after the baby's born, that starts switching. Your hormones are all switching around, and your body kicks back into like this higher like your immune system starts kicking in and taking off. And this is usually when women flare that have autoimmune diseases. So I was really panicking and I was trying desperately. And there's definitely times through there I thought I was heading straight into a flare, but I managed to stay out. Right now I'm kind of a little bit not sure, but I'm just really eating the right foods, trying to rest, all the things. So I'm really hoping I can stay on top of it, but it has been incredible so far, and I thank God for that. And thank you all for caring. A lot of you have asked. So far, no flare. All right, so the last point, which I already kind of alluded to at different times throughout this video with the birth and with the postpartum, like the difference between having your first child and your second child. Speaking of your first child, there is definitely something super, super special about your very firstborn. You become new parents, everything's this new experience, it's very magical. Yeah, it's just sort of this magical, almost euphoria that you experience with your first, if I can say it that way, I think. Not that you don't with your second, but it's just a little bit different. And so there's something I feel is very special that the firstborn holds that the rest of the children may not quite, as far as just, not that they're more special, not that you love them anymore, but just sort of that when you became a parent and you suddenly realized the incredible amount of love you can have for a child and just everything new about that. The other thing that's really nice with the first, it's your only child. You have no other children, and I'm sure those of you that have more than one other child know what I'm talking about, especially those of you that have many children. You know, you're not stretched around so much to other things and other people. So when you only have one child and you're kind of learning the whole thing, you can sleep a lot more, at least if you're a stay-at-home mom, you don't have another job or other responsibilities. You know, it's just the baby and you, so you don't have to really worry about anyone else. And that's really nice with the firstborn. I thought about it different times. It's so nice to have a really quiet house when it's just, you're recovering from the baby and you're just with your newborn. That is really special to me because I love quiet. I'm a loner. I am an introvert. And when you have a 5-year-old that is really loud all the time, and you're constantly trying to hush him and your nerves are a little bit on edge, that was something I missed with my first. Actually, one time, Nolan and Xander went away for a weekend. They had to go on a small trip, and it was just Lexi and I, and it actually felt amazing. It was just her and I. She would sleep. I would just relax. It's such a good feeling just to have a quiet house with you and your little baby. So that's a plus with the first. And there's a lot of other things I'm probably missing. Some of the negatives about your first, everything is new. You're basically starting from ground zero, especially for me. I didn't have any previous baby experience. I was the youngest of my family. I wasn't used to babies. I didn't know how to take care of them. Everything was new. Everything. Are they sick? Are they sad? Are they in pain? Why can't I get my baby to stop crying? Just all the things and all the stress and anxiety and things that come with being a new parent. That's always a negative with your first. So it's higher stress. I also feel like you have so much to learn. Along with that, you have so much to learn, and not just how to take care of a baby, but also like for yourself as a parent. Like suddenly you realize, and as a child grows as well, you may have thought you're a person that doesn't get easily angered, or maybe you thought you were super patient or whatever. It's when you have a child that you realize that you probably may not be any of those things because a child takes you and stretches you and tests you to the utmost capacity of your being. It's a good thing. It makes us grow up. It really does. And it makes us search ourselves and lean into God more, because honestly, parenting is such a huge responsibility, and you suddenly realize that all the things you thought you knew before you had children and all the things that your children would do and would not do kind of evaporates, and you realize that you have really no idea how to do this parenting thing. And I honestly think that if you think you have everything figured out, then you probably don't. Because it just throws you one curveball after the next. And I think the sooner you realize you just don't have things figured out and it's okay, and you just have to kind of take one day at a time, pray for wisdom, get wisdom from other people, give grace. I'm going through a book right now by, is it Paul David Tripp, called Parenting. Super good. I'll have links to it below. Definitely check it out. It's very much about grace-filled parenting, and it's really challenging me on my perception of parenting and what we are called to do with our children. But anyway, that's kind of sidetracking. So basically, you start eating a lot of words once you have a child. You know, before you had children, my child would never do this, never do that. And you kind of judge other people and their children. And then your child comes along and does the exact same thing. And you don't know how to handle it. And then you are very much humbled and put into your place, which is a good thing. They humble us. Now that's obviously a little bit later on, but I just even found in the newborn stage, like losing patience and getting very frustrated because Xander would just cry and cry, like go through these spells, and I would just get frantic. And I remember specifically, too much to my shame, I just remember yelling one time, like, "What do you want?" And no one was coming. I was just frustrated as this little baby. And I hate to even think that I did that, but it's just one of those things that you go through as a young parent, and just so much to learn. That's a pro of having your second. I just feel like you know so much more what to expect. Some of the things maybe don't set you off as quickly as they would have if it was your first child. Yeah, and so that kind of surprised me actually, because it had been so long. My oldest child was 5, and I felt like, you know what, this is going to be like having a new baby all over again, like a first child, because it's been so long since I've had a baby. I don't even know how to do this anymore. But once I had her, it just came naturally, and I remembered so much. And like, you know, she's insistently crying, which she doesn't do too much of, but I'd say she's a little fussier than Xander was. I feel like I can deal with it better this time than I did with him. Like, it's just, you understand a couple things. You understand how quickly they grow. For one, I just realized how fast the first year flew with Xander. And so it's easier for me to say, you know what, this is a stage, we're going to get through it. This crying thing, it's not going to last forever. And honestly, I feel almost bad saying it because she's been so incredibly good. She's a happy baby. She's not extremely fussy at all. It's just, you know, some moments, sort of like what Xander had done. And I just feel it's easier to deal with this time because you were there before. So that was one pro of your second child, is you've already been a parent, you've already walked the way. It comes much more easier, much more natural. I feel like you've developed more traits as a parent, like better traits. Maybe you've learned more patience, understanding, hopefully. It's something that we keep growing in. And so I feel like that also helps, just your view of yourself and you as a parent, even if it's just a little newborn. I hope that makes sense. Another really fun thing about your second child is the magic of having a sibling, like having Xander enjoy the child and seeing the siblings and his love for her. And that whole thing is so magical as well. And it's amazing. It's so much fun. And back to the birth of your second child, it's very magical. I just fell in love with Lexi. I'm like, how can I love my second child so much too? You know, your love doesn't divide, it just grows and expands. I just have so many good memories of being with her in the hospital and just like, oh my word, this is just so precious. And I was already thinking, I want more of these. I need more of these babies. It was crazy because I'm not really a baby person. I don't naturally gravitate towards other people's newborns, but my own, you're just like, oh, this is just the best stage ever, don't ever grow up, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so it's very magical with your second as well. I want to make sure to clarify that. There's just something about the extreme newness of your first one that has a little bit different element to it. Another big positive, which I said before, is I feel you heal much quicker with your second, at least for me personally. Yeah, it just feels like you're already in the parent mode, so that when the second one comes along, the baby fits more into your lifestyle than maybe the first one. The first one, I think, creates the biggest splash in adjusting, and the second one fits more into the family mode because you're already a family, you already have a child, and it's just easier. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of things as far as your first versus second. These are just some quick ones that popped into my mind. I was just so surprised with the much easier adjustment this round. I just thought it was going to be a much bigger splash than it was, and I am just so blessed with a baby that sleeps so well. When she's awake, she tends to not like to be by herself much, like Xander used to love to just be in his bouncer. She's not quite as much that way, although she's getting more like that. People keep asking why I don't wear my babies, like baby wear. I'm just one that I never really liked it. My babies don't really like it. Xander never liked it. She kind of fusses and grumps around when I put her in a sling. And I just feel like it just doesn't work for us. So I tend to like hold them, feed them, play with them some, and then try to put them down when I work or have them around me where I'm working. So sometimes she really likes it. She loves to stretch out and kick and play, but it doesn't usually last quite as long as it did for Xander. I feel she's a little bit more, probably the female side of her coming out. She wants to be held and know she's around people and loved and all that. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below about your first versus second or third or fourth and how that goes. I can't reply to everyone, but I like to try to get through all of them, at least give you a heart to let you know I read it. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.